Hello everyone, I have some important news. I am just checking that the videos are in all my channels. I am broadcasting in 7 or 8 Facebook pages plus in one of my YouTube channels, you know, to get out this information. So today I'm going to show you an interview. It was a private interview in a Zoom call. I was invited because the information is very important, but before you go, I will show you something. I have to speak in code, as you know, because this is very important. Okay. This is something that the government in the US is giving for free. I have to cover up the name, but you are very smart, you know what I'm talking about. Is the thingy that they put up your nose to see if you have this bug. And a friend of mine, I told her, I gave her this. This is an UV light. It's $15, US dollars. And I gave it to him, to her. I said, every time that you do that test, shine the light on the, I don't even want to say the names. Can you see this? Well, it's too light. And this is what she sent me. This is what she sent me. And I gave her this. I never used this, but the government gives it for free. I got 2 of them and I gave her once. And one of the things have that. All right, take a look. We have the 2 things inside of this, and this is the light. But the problem that I had to shine the light. Look, can you see that? Can you see that? That only one lights up, glows, which is this one. Well, that is exactly the same as that one. And look what I have here. Because of that, I ordered more. There are 8 of them. I didn't even open this. And I will show you to you, but in the middle of the video, because this is a way to fool you know what. So we're going to watch this video for about 15 minutes, and I'm going to show you this. Here in California, in the US, we are fighting so they don't mandate or they don't make available the things to the kids, which is the same as mandates. Because if the kids don't have the thingy in the arm, they are not admitted to school. And we are voting today for that law. If I had the opportunity, I'm going to go to Sacramento, the capital of California, and show them this. This sucks, makes me so mad. Because if you don't have this, what do you think that there is in this here glowing? Let me see if you can, let me see. You can see what is in here, right? The thing that starts with SWAB. And you stick up into your nose that glowing thing, I'm pretty sure it's not something healthy. And my opinion is, they either put all the weird stuff through your arm or through the thing on your nose. Okay, Let's watch this video for a while, and I will show you. I will open this and we are going to test the 8 boxes. Oh, the other important thing. When my friend sent me the link, the noise is because of the curtains. I have to make it a little darker so we can see. When my friend sent me this, she said, okay, the government is giving this for free. They were giving 2, only 2. That was, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 months ago. And because of what happened, I'm going to show you again this thing that my friend sent me. Hey, what happened? That thing, I ordered again, and guess what? They send 8 now. They send 8. Why? Because they want people to panic and do this test. I never done any test. And I had the bag 8 months ago. And it's a piece of cake to get out of that. Why they are giving more for free? What do you think? Because they think we are stupid. Most people are. Alright, let's go to the video. The video is about this brave lawyer that is suing the governor of New York because there is a regulation. I interviewed her a couple of weeks ago, but this is another video. Is suing the governor of California, of New York, because there is a regulation that allows the government to send anyone that they think without any proof that has a contagious disease. They send them to a quarantine camp. They lock you down in your home, in a hospital, in a hotel, or any quarantine camp. And this is not in the news. And most of the bloggers, with the people who are videos, are not talking about this. And if this continues in New York, what happens in New York or in California, here in the US, happens in the whole country. And if it happens in the US, it will happen in Canada, in England, in New Zealand, in Australia, and then all over the world. What does it mean? We can end up in quarantine camps, like in the Second World War, anytime. Let's watch the video. By the way, I was in that Zoom call. After I'm going to cover the name of the this gentleman just for security. I was in that Zoom and I asked him for the video and he sent it to me. After a few minutes, we are going to do the experiment with the glowing toys.
Briefly, but she's a great warrior.
I would say.
Yeah. But we'll find out more about her shortly. I think I've covered anybody. If anybody is not, to speak up. If I didn't reach anybody.
Was Lee Dundas?
Yes, she spoke. Lee Dundas
Yes.
spoke.
Oh,
Okay.
I got cut out for a while. Something
John
went wrong.
Gilmore?
Yeah, we got John. We got John.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
I got cut out.
We can go to our concentration. It threatens all of us. Bobbie Ann Cox, she's an attorney of many years practice. And so far, she's the only attorney in New York, and I think probably in America, who's actually challenging these concentration right now regulation, mask as a law, which you'll explain more details. I consider this to be one of the most serious issues facing us right now, because it threatens all of us, every single one of us. What do you think the word is, which she'll go into? And I just have to say, I admire her courage, and I'm very happy doing this and many other things to promote what she's doing, because what she's doing deserves attention and our support. And country, millions of people need to know this, because once they know this, everybody becomes outraged. The only way they can even get this far is because most people don't know what's going on. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Attorney Bobbie Ann Cox.
Okay, great. Thanks, Curtis. I want to thank you so much for organizing this meeting. It's so great to meet all of you and be on this meeting together. So basically, just a quick background on me. I'm an attorney here in New York. I've been practicing for almost 25 years now. And I was originally with the international law firm Nixon Peabody. Was there for a few years and then went out on my own. I founded Cox Lawyers, which is my own law office here in Westchester County. So I'm just north of New York City. I'm aware of Children's Health Defense. I know John Gilmore. We met maybe a year or so ago through the New York Freedom Fight. I actually know Bobbie Kennedy Jr. He was one of my professors in law school. So, and I saw him not too long ago at a Children's Health Defense event. So that was fun to reunite. But anyway, so my background is that I was, before COVID, I was a tax cert attorney. Or I am a tax cert attorney. I just don't have time to do much of that. And so I've been suing the government for a couple decades, right? So tax certs are when you represent property owners and you sue the government on a local level. So you sue the county, the school, the town, the village, the city. And basically you're suing to get a more proper assessment on a property so that the property owners are paying their fair share instead of paying too much. I am familiar with dealing with the government. And in March of 2020, when Governor Cuomo said, okay, everybody lock down, stay in your house, we're just going to do it for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I was like, oh, no, no, the government doesn't do anything for 2 weeks. And by the way, he can't tell us to stay in our houses, right? So because I'm an attorney, everybody started reaching out, emailing, calling, sending me text messages. Do I have to stay in my house? Do I have to shut my business? I can't pay my bills. Now it's like, it's not 2 weeks, now it's 2 months, then it's 4 months, and people, they couldn't sustain their businesses or they were losing their jobs because they were getting fired because the small businesses that were employing them couldn't pay all their employees because they couldn't serve their customers. So it just began to snowball. I couldn't help everybody. I just said, you know what, I'm going to start making videos and answer all these questions in videos. And I just started posting videos online to try and help people understand what was going on. And so, I started posting on YouTube and then Rumble and whatever. So I still do that a little bit today to try and help people understand what's going on. Most of the videos today that I'm talking about are regarding this quarantine lawsuit. But anyway, it just kind of snowballed into people asking me to come talk to their groups. There were a lot of freedom fighting groups popping up around New York State since March of 2020. So I was just kind of crisscrossing the state, giving speeches and talking to people and trying to help them understand what was going on. I got involved with a citizens group that we formed in 2021. And that citizens group is called Uniting New York State. That's one of the petitioners in my lawsuit. I'm also representing a group of New York State legislators. So I'm representing Senator George Borrello, Assemblyman Chris Tague, and Assemblyman Mike Lawler. So those three New York State legislators, along with the citizens group, are who are the petitioners in the lawsuit. So they're the plaintiffs. It's an Article 78 proceeding, which just means it's a type of lawsuit where you can sue government actors for either something they're not doing that they're supposed to be doing or something that they are doing that they should not be doing. So my lawsuit falls in the latter category. The premise of the lawsuit is separation of powers. So the governor and the Department of Health promulgated this regulation. It's called Isolation and Quarantine Procedures. It can be found at 10 NYCRR 2.13. And what this regulation says is basically the Department of Health, the Commissioner of Health, and whoever she appoints can pick and choose which New Yorkers they can force to quarantine. So they can force you to quarantine in your home, or they can remove you from your home and they can force you to quarantine in a facility that they choose. You don't have a say. There is no restriction as to time frame. So they can tell you you have to lock down in your house for a few days, a few weeks, a few months, who knows how long. Similarly, if they remove you from your home and put you into a quarantine facility, they get to decide how long you stay there. They do not have to prove that you have a communicable disease. They just have to think maybe you were exposed to a communicable disease. So you don't have to be sick and you don't have to exhibit symptoms. They just have to think you were exposed. So if you think about it just for a minute there, that could mean anything, right? That could mean you went to an event and somebody at the event had COVID or had tuberculosis or whatever. And now they're going to tell you, well, sorry, but you have to come with us and, stay in this quarantine detention center for however many days or weeks. I mean, it's unbelievable, but it gets worse. So the regulation also has no age restriction. So they can come and force you to lock down or lock you up. They can force your child. They can force your grandchild. They can force your parent, your elderly grandparent. There are no age restrictions with this regulation. They have written into the regulation that they can use local law enforcement to help them carry out their order. So you could get a knock on the door from the sheriff or local police saying, here's your order of quarantine, come with us. I mean, it's unbelievable. They gave the power to themselves. So how our government is structured is, separation of powers means we have 3 branches of government. We've got judicial branch, executive branch, and the legislative branch. The judicial, executive, and legislative branches are created with their own powers, right? They each have their own authorities and they're supposed to be co-equal. So they're all supposed to be equal with each other. One of them is not supposed to dictate what the other ones do. Okay, so on that premise, we've got the Department of the Executive Branch in New York State is the governor and then the agencies beneath her. So the Department of Health in this case. The Department of Health or any agency can't make a regulation, a rule, whatever you want to call it, unless they have the direction to do so, right? So if you think about it, the reason that our founders set up the 3 branches of government the way they did was because the legislature makes the laws. The legislature are the people that we represent us because we elect them. Every 2 years here in New York State, we go to the polls and we vote for New York State senators and New York State assemblymen. So those people that we elect to represent us make the laws. In the executive branch, where you have agencies, you have tons of different agencies. In this lawsuit, we're talking about the Department of Health. The Department of Health is made up of not elected officials. You don't go to the polls and vote for them. They're made up, the Department of Health is made up of appointed officials. So the Commissioner of Health sits at the pleasure of the governor, and everybody that works in the Department of Health, they're government employees. So they're not supposed to be making laws. They're not supposed to make rules that they don't have the authority from the legislature to make. So how it's supposed to work is the legislature can pass a law, and then an agency can make a rule or a regulation to help implement that law. So the executive branch, their duty is to carry out the laws that are made by the legislature. Okay, so in this instance, what happened was the Department of Health makes this regulation. They did not have an enabling statute or the authority. They did not have an authority from the legislature to make this law. I'm calling it a law. They call it a regulation, but it's really a law. Agencies can't make law. The executive branch can't make law. Only the legislature can make law. Okay, that's the cornerstone of separation of powers. And the Attorney General, so I'm up against the Attorney General in New York State because that's who represents the governor and the Department of Health and such. So, and the Attorney General's office does not dispute that. They agree. Three different branches, separation of powers, great. So this regulation is unconstitutional on many levels. The main argument is because they have usurped the power of the legislature by going around them and making a law. They're calling it a regulation, but it's a law. The executive branch doesn't get to make law, so they've usurped the power of the legislature. Therefore, any legislator, any New York State legislator is being injured. And if they're being injured because their job is being circumvented or taken away from them, the people's voice is also being extinguished because we elect them and they are supposed to represent us. And if we don't like the laws they're making, our recourse is we vote them out and we vote somebody else in. So if we can't speak through our legislators and our legislators can't be the ones making the laws like they're supposed to be, then the people are also being injured. So with this regulation, number one, it breaches separation of powers. Number two, even if it didn't breach separation of powers, it's still unconstitutional because it violates numerous New York State statutory provisions. So in New York State, we already have state law that's been on the books for decades that talks about how you remove somebody from society if they are a public health threat. Public health law section 2120 clearly lays out the steps that have to be taken if you're going to remove somebody from society because they have a communicable disease and they're not acting in a proper manner to try and protect other people around them. And there are a number of steps that have to be taken. First and foremost, the government has to prove that the person actually has the communicable disease that we're talking about, right? They can't just think maybe you were exposed. So they have to prove you're actually sick. There has to be an investigation. They have to come up with evidence. There has to be a hearing in front of a magistrate. And if the magistrate decides after hearing and seeing all the evidence that the person not only has the communicable disease, but that the person can't or is not conducting themselves in a proper manner to try and keep other people safe around them, then the magistrate can issue an order of quarantine. Okay, so this regulation flies in the face of that law. I mean, it's the antithesis of that law. And section 2100 of the public health law also says that that has to happen if you're going to remove somebody from society. Those steps that you're going to take has to happen through the local health authorities. Okay, it's done at a local level. What this regulation does is completely contradicts that because it gives the power to the state. It's removing the power from the local health authorities to the state actors, and it's giving the commissioner of health this incredible power to pick and choose who gets to live their life normally and who gets to be either locked down in their house or locked up in a facility. So there are other provisions of the public health law that this regulation conflicts with. Section 12, Section 12A, talking about what recourse the government has if somebody violates a public health order. They, as I said earlier, they wrote into this regulation that they can use local law enforcement to help them enforce their orders, but that's not what the public health law says. Okay, so on many levels, they have created a regulation that basically overrules or overrides public health law provisions that we have properly passed through our legislature and have had on the books for decades. Furthermore, we've got the whole issue of due process, right? So you can't just, or the government can't just lock people up for no reason, right? We have so many due process protections in our laws, and it's very clearly laid out in our Constitution. So it's extremely important that we understand this regulation stripped out all the due process provisions from the public health law sections that talk about isolating and quarantining New Yorkers. So it is complete tyranny, I mean, on so many levels. And again, they gave themselves the power. The legislature did not say to the executive branch, here's a law, we want to isolate and quarantine New Yorkers, make a reg to carry it out. That is not what happened. And in fact, the opposite happened. There was a proposed law, which in its most recent form was A416. It was proposed by Assemblyman Nick Perry. He's no longer an assemblyman, but Since 2015, Perry was proposing a law that was very similar to this regulation. Same sum and substance. It gave the governor the power to lock people up, or, they had to, and I hate to say it, A416, the proposed legislation, actually had some slight, small due process provisions in it. This regulation has none. I mean, just totally strip them out.
We're going to take a break, so I'm going to do the testing right in front of your eyes. So for those who came later, a friend of mine sent me this picture. This thing is, I need to talk in, you are very smart, I need to talk in code. So the thing is that they put to people to do the test, which is all BS, as you know. So what happened is, I bought this. What is it? This is an UV light, LED. And I gave it to my friend because she has to travel on airplanes. And whenever she travels, she has to do the test. I said, before you do a test, do this. And a week ago, she said me, Carlos, you were right. She sent me the picture. And this is what we are going to do today. I do have, I sent her, because she got sick, these are the, let me just do the things in order. The US government is giving for free these things. You are going to understand what it says there. And these two things come in this kit. So I got only two, like, I don't know, 3 months ago or 4 months ago. I don't remember. I gave one to her because she was running out of kit. I never used this because I know that there is something in there. And this is what happened. It's difficult to see. I'm going to shine the light. It's down there here. This is real time. This is me. I'm going to shine the UV light. You will see lightly, and you will see what happened. Okay. Can you see that only? Okay. I need to do it. What happened is the camera. Let me see. There. Can you see that only one glows? Can you see that? The one that glows is this one. The first one. Look. Look. Can you see that the other doesn't even glow and both are receiving the light? Okay. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to open this. Can you see this is sealed? I got it 3 days ago, and I didn't open because I don't even know what is in here. Honestly, I hope they are. I just want to show you the shine. So this is sealed. You can see it there. This is sealed over here. You can see it. Let's open it. And please share, because this is really important. Cha-chan! Let me see. Oh no, this is not the one. I'm so sorry. This is something else. Okay. When I got the other things, because the size looked like a... All right, I don't have it. We are going to watch the video. But the thing is that, let me see if I can do it closer to you. No, closer to the other camera. So I didn't get that thingy yet. Okay, there. Let me see if we can do it from there. Can you see? Can you see that only one glows? Look, there we go. Can you see? And the interesting thing is this. I just realized today. Can you see that one is longer than the other? They say exactly the same thing. Let me see. I open this. And I'm going to put the other two. But these two don't glow. I already tested. They don't glow. But the interesting thing is this. Can you see that this tree that do not glow has a little lighter color, this orange, and these are a little longer? When I get the A packages, let's see what happened. So what does it mean? How come in the same kit came one that is different than the other? Okay, that's all the information I have for today, and let's do it one more time. I'm going to get the 4 together, and let's see what happened. So okay, let me see. Something like that. Can you see, let me see. Oh, yes. Can you see that only one? Oh, look at that. This is very noticeable. There. Okay, no. There. Can you see? Look. There is nothing there. How do I do this? I want to see the 4. And if I shine the light, you see this glows like crazy. All the others do not glow. Look. All right, let's keep watching the video and share this because this is very important. Let's watch Bobbie Cox, the lawyer that is suing New York's governor because they can put in a concentration camp any person they want.
Anyway, back to A416. So for 7 years, Assemblyman Nick Perry proposes this legislation to the New York State Legislature. He was an assemblyman. He introduced it through the assembly in a committee that was the Health Committee. It never got on the agenda in the Health Committee. It never was put to a vote in the Health Committee. It never made it to the floor of the assembly. It was never voted on in the assembly. It never had a sister bill or companion bill created in the Senate.
I just want to refresh what she was talking about. This bill, this regulation that is a law in New York, is practically the same reach of a law. There was another senator trying to pass a bill 98% similar for the last 7 years, and nobody, absolutely nobody supported the bill. And this guy pulled down the video in 2020 or 2021 and the governor of New York took that bill, modified it a little bit and make it like a regulation. So she's talking about that bill that was proposed like 7 years ago and never passed.
Yes.
It was so unpopular with New York State legislators.
Bobbie, let me just
Not-
1 second. Michael, can you please mute yourself? Michael Kane and anybody else who has noise in the background, please mute yourselves. Thank you. I'm sorry, Bobbie.
That's okay. That's okay. I was just saying that A416 gained absolutely no support. So if you combine the number of New York State senators and New York State Assembly members, you combine the two houses together, you have over 200 representatives, 200 New York State legislators. Not one of them got behind that bill. Okay, so think about it. Not one of them got behind the bill, yet the governor and the Department of Health decide to take basically the same language and push it through the Department of Health as a regulation when none of the legislators even wanted to consider it. It was the bill was so unpopular. Nick Perry actually withdrew it in December of 2021 because the public started to really hear about it. I think it started to gain some notoriety, if you will, because of because of COVID and the fact that there was a lot of quarantining going on and forced isolation and such. So people just went crazy. I mean, they were emailing his office, calling his office, not at all in favor of this. So he eventually withdrew it, which according to the group of New York State legislators that I'm representing and others, because there's also an amicus brief, which I'll get to in a second. It's very rare for a New York State legislator to actually withdraw proposed legislation. Normally they would just strike the enabling clause, but here he actually withdrew it. And the other thing was that it was introduced in the health committee, and the chairman or the head of the health committee in the assembly was asked about this bill because it started to gain national attention and during COVID, and he publicly stated that he denounced the bill. He said this bill is not even going to be put on our agenda. So the bill was completely, I mean, it was to say it failed is like an understatement, right? So we already know that the New York State legislature does not want to promulgate a law that forces New Yorkers to isolate and quarantine, anyway. So they didn't have the power. My bottom line is they didn't have the power coming from the legislature to make this regulation. They just made it because they wanted to make it. There's a group of New York State legislators who wrote an amicus brief. So just for anybody that's not really sure what an amicus brief is, if you are not a party to a lawsuit, so you're not the plaintiff, you're not the defendant, but you have a heavy interest in the outcome of that lawsuit, you can file a brief with the court in support of one side or the other. And in this case, there was a group of New York State legislators, or there is a group of New York State legislators who are supporting our case. They're not the named plaintiffs, or they're not the named petitioners in the suit. It's another group, and it's headed up by Assemblyman Andy Goodell. He's also an attorney. But so that has been filed. Now, the Attorney General's office, of course, opposed the filing of the amicus brief. So we had to go through motion practice to get the amicus brief admitted into the court. So basically that just means they took a lot of our time and energy and resources to fight over motion practice, to ultimately the judge did rule in our favor, and the amicus brief has been allowed into court. So, but yeah, that's not normal, by the way. Typically you don't see opposition to an amicus brief to try and keep it out of the court. So they obviously didn't want the judge to read further support from additional New York State legislators that felt that this case was pretty solid. The other thing I wanted to mention was this regulation actually started in March of 2020 under Governor Cuomo. He was given incredible power by the New York State legislature. In March of 2020, when the pandemic first hit New York, the legislature convened and they unfortunately they didn't pass a law. They changed a provision of the executive law, 29-A. And they changed it such that the governor could, in a time of emergency, which the governor is the one that declares the emergency. So in the time of an emergency, the governor could issue directives, is the language that they used. So typically a governor can just suspend laws in a time of emergency. They can't make laws. But here the legislature gave Cuomo the fascinating power to issue directives, which just basically means make law. So that in and of itself is unconstitutional, but we won't go there right now because they did it and it's done. So he then turned around and by executive order number 202, he gave the power to the Commissioner of Health in New York State. And he said, okay, do what you have to do. So that's when this reg was originally promulgated, was under these special powers that were given to the governor, and then he passed on to the Commissioner of Health. So a year later, March of 2021, the New York State legislature then revokes that power from him. So they changed section 29-A of the executive law again to put it back to the way that it was before. And they took away his ability to issue directives. Everybody was calling them mandates in New York. Oh, we have a mask mandate, lockdown mandate, whatever. This was because section 29-A was amended by the legislature. So March of 2021, they change it back. Now he can't do it anymore. He can't issue directives. The Commissioner of Health. However, his Department of Health, let's see, that was March of 2021. They issued one more of these emergency regs. So it should follow that if the governor's special temporary emergency powers were taken away, then the agencies to which he passed on that power would also have it taken away. In June 24th of 2021, Cuomo issues a declaration saying, okay, no more COVID-19 pandemic in New York, we're done. And he issued an executive order that revoked all of the prior COVID era executive orders, including Executive Order 202, which is the one that gave the power to the Commissioner of Health. So definitely in June of 2021, the Department of Health loses this power, okay? Then Cuomo steps down in August 2021. Hochul rises from lieutenant governor to governor, and she has the Department of Health continue to issue the same exact word for word regulation that Cuomo was doing under his administration. And every couple of months, they just keep reissuing this regulation under emergency powers. However, they're working to make it permanent, which they have admitted in their papers, and they also admitted during oral arguments about a week or so ago. So they want this to be permanent. The regulation, I'm going to point out, does not require for it to be an emergency for the Department of Health to issue these isolation and quarantine orders. So that means that they can just do it whenever they want. It doesn't even have to be during a period of state of emergency declaration.
Go, wow.
So,
Yeah.
you got to please.
Oh, I know him.
yourself.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, she
that's,
asked-
Lorraine, can you mute yourself?
His daughter, Isabel Spencer, his daughter.
Really?
Lorraine, Lauren, I'm sorry, can you please mute yourself?
Oh, sorry about that.
Not a problem. Everyone, if you have background noise, please mute yourself. Sorry, Bobbie.
That's okay. That's all right. So yeah, so basically I'm explaining why it is that they don't have this power. When we had oral arguments about a week or so ago, the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General that I was arguing against, basically summed everything up by saying, we need this power. We need the power to be able to force citizens to lock down or lock up whenever we want. And he was like, don't you want us to have this power? I mean, we need this power because we need to be able to control everybody, and like I said, we already have law in New York State that has provisions that will protect the person. It's called due process, will protect the person that you're trying to remove from society. You can't, regulations cannot conflict with laws. If this regulation is allowed to stand and we cannot get the court to strike it down ultimately and declare it null and void and unconstitutional and have it withdrawn, if we can't nullify this, it's going to mean that the executive branch has now risen above the legislative branch, and that the executive branch can issue regulations, as they call them, or rules that conflict with laws that our representatives in the Senate and the Assembly pass. And that means that the legislature is subservient to the executive branch, and the executive branch, the floodgates will open. The executive branch will start, not that they're not already doing it, but they'll do it even more, will start issuing regulations that conflict with laws, that conflict with the Constitution, and it'll just be, I mean, that's tyranny. When one power base takes the power from the others, that's tyranny, right? And who suffers in the face of tyranny? It's not the power makers and grabbers, it's the people. The people are who suffer when there's a tyrannical situation going on. So this, in my opinion, this lawsuit is really instrumental in getting the separation of powers back into its proper form. I think we've seen on not just the New York State level, but in other states as well, and at the federal level, since COVID began in March of 2020 in this country, we have seen a power grab like never before from the executive branch of government. My case is very similar to the case that the United States Supreme Court just decided back in January. So last year, I'm sure everybody remembers the Biden push for, he told OSHA, basically, OSHA is an agency in the executive branch underneath the president, who is the executive branch, the head of the executive branch. He told OSHA, issue this regulation, require all companies in the United States that have 100 or more employees to require the COVID-19 shot. Otherwise, they have to force their employees to mask and test weekly and all this other stuff. So Biden got sued, OSHA got sued. It went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And in January of this year, the Supreme Court ruled and said, that is not a regulation. yes, OSHA is an agency, it can make regulations, but that is not a regulation. That is a law. And you can't make laws because you're in the executive branch of government. Congress can make laws because Congress is the legislative branch of government. So they struck it down. The United States Supreme Court struck it down, and it was not enforceable. So it was a total separation of powers argument. And that's what my lawsuit is against the quarantine facilities. Forced isolation and quarantine is separation of powers. You can't leave your lane, executive branch, and go into the lawmaking lane of the legislature, because that's not your job. You have to stay in your lane and do what you do, which is enforce the laws that the legislature passes. So I think, I don't know, Curtis, if you want me to answer some questions or clarify anything.
Well,
But
before, I'll tell you this, what you can also do, because we are going to open up the questions and comments. Could you give us some idea, what kinds of things can people do to help your effort and be supportive? Can you give us some idea of where people can go to get more information, and then we'll turn it over for questions, comments, suggestions from everyone.
Okay, yeah. So the citizens group that's part of this lawsuit is Uniting New York State, and they created a webpage specifically for the lawsuit. So everybody who wants more information can go to, it's www.unitingnys.com/lawsuit. And on that page, there is a lot of information about how people can get involved. There are pictures from a press conference that we did in Albany when we launched the lawsuit a couple months ago. There's a few videos on there. There's a short 2-minute commercial about the regulation and then about the lawsuit. There are flyers on that page that people can download onto and post on their social media, or you can print out flyers and hand them out or pin them up at, the supermarket bulletin board or the library bulletin board, like wherever. The biggest thing that people can do is really help us spread the word is like number one, because nobody really knows about this regulation. I mean, I talk to people about it and they're like, you got to be kidding me. No way. And I'm like, well, I can show you, it's right here in black and white. There's also on that webpage, there's a link to the regulation itself. So you can read the regulation firsthand. So people don't know about this regulation, and this is not a partisan thing. Uniting New York State is comprised of people that are, left wing, right wing, center, people that don't even have a political party. It's not about politics and parties. It's about civil rights and freedom and the preservation of our rights. So many people have left New York in the past 2+ years with all this COVID stuff. People are just tired of the tyranny and they're fleeing to, freer states. And hey, I was tempted myself, but, I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute, if everybody leaves and this tyranny is allowed to continue in New York and they start getting regs and laws that are going to be steadfast in New York, it's going to spread. I mean, you can run to another state and maybe you can hide for a bit, but it's eventually going to catch up to you. It's eventually going to come to that state. That's what happens. Typically, New York is usually a trendsetter, whether it's fashion or law or, insanity, it'll start here. And then when, Connecticut sees New York is doing it. Now Connecticut's going to do it. Wait, New Jersey sees New York is doing it. Now New Jersey's going to do it. All these states are going to just start saying, well, wait a minute, New York is forcibly quarantining and isolating their citizens. Why can't we do it? And they're all doing it. This regulation is, according to the Attorney General's office, all in the name of public health and safety. Well, unfortunately for them, that's not really how it works. You have to have a balance. That's how it works. There has to be a balance between public health and safety, yes, which is very important, obviously, but you also have to balance the rights of the individuals. So it's a balancing game. And there's the seminal case, New York State case, which is a New York State Court of Appeals case, which is the highest court in New York State. It's called Boreali versus Axelrod. And in that case, they lay out steps of how can you tell if something's a regulation or a law. And one of the steps is, did the agency do a balancing act, right? Did the agency try to determine rights versus public health, for example, in this case? So it's very clear, according to not just the case law, but constitutional law and the way the regulation was done and what the regulation actually says, that it's unconstitutional on multiple levels. So I think the biggest thing that we're looking for is to have people help spread the word. Someone that has a podcast, or someone that does a radio show, or someone that has an online newspaper, or a print newspaper, or a television host. We need media to pick this up, because the mainstream media is completely ignoring this, sweeping it under the rug. The governor right now in New York, we're in a state of emergency. In case anybody didn't know, we're in a state of emergency in New York, according to the governor, because of COVID-19. So every 30 days, she reissues a state of emergency, and she just reissued one on May 15th, which will expire on June 15th. But she has to keep doing that, because she has to be able to promulgate these emergency regulations continuously. She has to keep us in a state of emergency. So while they're working, and this is their words, not mine, this is the AG's words, while they're working to make this regulation permanent. Okay, so this is really serious, and it's not going away. And we are waiting for, we had oral arguments, so we're waiting for the judge to issue his decision. But I'm sure if he rules in our favor, I'm sure the Attorney General is going to appeal the case, right? They're just going to take it to the next level, which is the appellate division. And then if we win there, I'm sure they're going to take it to the Court of Appeals. So I'm sure they're not going to give up this power grab so easily. But it's crucial that we win this fight. It's crucial, because if forced isolation and quarantine and facilities are allowed to happen in New York, it's going to spread across the country, and then it's going to spread across the world, because we've already got some countries, as Curtis said earlier, that are already doing this, right? And I'm sure everyone's seen horrific videos and photographs online, but we cannot let that happen in this country. I mean, if the Constitution is upheld, we can stop that from happening in this case. We just need the Constitution to be upheld. So yeah, the other thing that people can do is, help us spread the word. There are on that website, there are also volunteer opportunities if people want to help volunteer. I'm doing this case pro bono, so I'm not getting paid. So there's a donation link on there. People can donate, which is very appreciative. I'm very appreciative of any donations that can come in. But yeah, we need more people to wake up. We need more people to know about this lawsuit. The more people that hear about this regulation, I think, are going to be just a horde. And then I think that they will stand up. When you know that other people or groups are standing up to fight something, it kind of empowers you to do it too. So I think the more people that hear about this, they'll say, oh my gosh, oh no, I have to jump in here. Like, what can I do to help? And, you don't have to dedicate every day, all day to this, like I do. You just helping however you can, helping networking, or spreading the word, or donations, or whatever it is, whatever your specialty is. I would love to have help with this, because it's the mainstream media is, and then cancel culture. You try and post something on these platforms and it gets ripped down, you get 5 views, they shadow ban you, or they just pull you off. I've been thrown into YouTube jail like 1,000,000 times because they don't like my videos because I tell the truth. So it's so important to spread the word. And in an age of cancel culture, I know that's hard, because I know a lot of people don't want to stand up and speak out because they're afraid to lose their job. I totally get it. They're afraid to lose friends or family members that'll turn against them. I totally get it. But if you're not able to stand up and publicly speak out, at least support behind the scenes, support the people who who are standing up and who are on the front lines, so to speak, trying to preserve the Constitution and preserve our freedoms. So that's unitingnys.com/lawsuit is the webpage. And you can also sign up there for weekly newsletters. They send out a newsletter once a week to give people an update on the lawsuit, and then other things that are going on in the world of, trying to preserve
Bobbie,
our constitutional rights.
On that website, can people reach you on that website also? Is there some type of contact information on that website?
There's a contact form also where it says contact us, but I'm happy to give, if people want to, Uniting New York State is all volunteers. And so they have an email, which is outreach@unitingnys.com. And they know that anything that goes into that email is probably for me. So they share it with me, they pass it along. So it's outreach@unitingnys.com. So if anybody wants to directly email, that's the best way to do it. But yeah, and to sign up for the weekly newsletters is also on unitingnys.com. You can just click on I think it says sign up or subscribe. Right. I don't know, something like that.
What I'm also going to, Bobbie and I talked about people here, if they want to reach you by phone or some other way quicker. We were going to turn off we'd stop record at the end and let her share other contact information, but I think that might create a technical problem. So what I'm going to do for those who are on the call, those who are interested, I will provide you with our contact information that she wants to share. So everybody here on the call, because this might go out to other places. So I will provide that to everybody who's on the call who's interested. So you'll be able to reach her directly on this. So I think with that, I will open it up for questions, comments. Please try to keep comments and things brief, because I know there's probably a bunch of people who want to have input, and we want to try and cover those that we can as quickly as we can. Starting with Mary Holland, I know you have your hand up.
Hi, Bobbie. Great presentation. Thanks so much. Two things. I'm on your website, Uniting New York State, and I can't find any link to the papers. I'd really love to read the actual brief and read the amicus brief, and there's no link to that. So if they could put that, I think that'd be a good thing to do. What court are you before? What judge are you before right now?
So we filed in Cattaraugus County. It's Judge Ronald Plotz. And my lead plaintiff is Senator George Borrello. You can, Mary, I know you're an attorney. You can look it up on NICEF, or I can just email it. I can email it to you, or you can look it up on NICEF. But it's Cattaraugus County and George Borrello, 2 R's, 2 L's. Okay. Is my. And are you
waiting for a decision right now? Then. Yeah.
We just did oral arguments about 10 days ago.
Okay, so you're expecting a decision very soon.
I hope so. Yes.
Just to mention, you may not be aware of this, but in the measles crisis, so-called, in Rockland County, we had an Article 78 that Michael Sussman brought, and we won that case, that the county executive had overstayed had not followed the sort of regulations that were, the law that was applicable for state of emergency. And it was quite, contentious at the time. So I want to make sure you're aware of that case.
Oh yeah, I'd love to read that.
Yeah. It was a good decision. Basically, the judge said, doesn't qualify as an epidemic. Sorry, you can't close down Rockland County.
Oh, great. Okay, I'm jotting that down.
Great. Anyone else has a question, comment?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Lorraine.
I put it in on the chat thing too, but basically, why would you not be representing every legislator? Are they unaware that this is a breach of separation of powers? And I also put in a note to you that, are they aware they're being castrated? I mean, if they're not, it seems to me one of the things you would want to do, or somebody would want to do, is get to each one of those legislators to get them to really understand this. Whether they're in support of public health or not isn't even the point. It's about, as you're pointing out, it's about usurp of powers, and are they willing to sit still for this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lorraine. So the group of legislators who are on the suit first of all, to answer the first part, the wording that I use in the lawsuit is that I'm representing these named legislators and all those similarly situated. So technically, I'm representing the entire New York State legislature. However, on the individual basis of what you're asking, I have spoken with many New York State legislators who support the lawsuit, but will not publicly support the lawsuit because they feel like this is an election year. And if they're in like a purple district, they fear, backlash from voters who might be for, I don't know who would be for, be in favor of forced isolation and quarantines like this. But this is the response that I've gotten. I have to say, I don't feel that this should be partisan, but not one Democratic lawmaker has spoken to me about this case. Anyone I have spoken to about this case has been Republican, not because I haven't tried to reach out to Democrats. They just, no one's interested in talking to me about it. And I'm not saying all the Republicans are interested in talking to me about it, but those that are all the named petitioners on this lawsuit are Republican legislators, and all the ones on the amicus brief are also. Actually, the amicus brief is so Assemblyman Andy Goodell is the pro tempore of the Assembly in New York State. So he's the second highest ranking Republican in the Assembly. And also on that amicus brief is Assemblyman Will Barkley, who's the minority leader in the Assembly. So he's the highest ranking Republican in the New York State Assembly. But, again, it shouldn't be partisan. There should be all 200 something legislators should be on this lawsuit with their name on it, right? They should be calling me saying, put my name on this, or at least making a public statement or writing their own amicus brief or something. I agree with you. There should be more public, I guess, recognition of the fact that this regulation is horribly unconstitutional.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of them fear political backlash. I was talking to one of the legislators who said that, he really supports the case, but he had gone up against the governor on something else in the past. And the backlash he got from the governor was tremendous through, whatever avenues she used to do that. It's unfortunately politics plays in, and that's why I really appreciate the New York State legislators who have written the amicus brief and who are on this lawsuit as named petitioners, because they are standing up, and they're standing up for the people, not just for their duties and jobs as New York State legislators. So, but yeah, look, if I had the manpower, I would absolutely have people calling every single New York State legislator. I'm happy to meet with every single one of them and explain this lawsuit and encourage them to either come on or write an amicus brief or make a public statement. I'm willing to do that, but I don't have the manpower for people to reach out to all of them.
Maybe volunteers could do that. They could divide up the legislator into smaller groups, and different people could volunteer to contact them.
Yeah,
that might be something to put on that Uniting New York State lawsuit. List the legislators, their contact information, and ask for people to volunteer to contact them. And maybe you have a pre-prepared little speech that people can read, you put on the website.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. They actually have that posted as under the news section of unitingnys.com. There is such there's a blog, that has exactly what you just said. So yeah, it's just a matter of people, it's also people start to, like, when the mask mandate's totally illegal, the governor can't tell you to wear a mask, by the way, FYI. When the mask mandate was lifted in March here in New York, everybody was like, oh, great, this is awesome. And a lot of people, I think, breathed a sigh of relief and they're like, it's over. And I'm like, no, it's not over, because the highest court in New York State has not ruled that that is unconstitutional. So she's just going to keep doing it until the highest court in New York State shuts it down. So yeah, I think people need to understand this is just a pause. And if they can keep this quarantine regulation in place, this is just the beginning. They're not going to stop with the regulation that I'm fighting. That's for sure.
Are they going to use FEMA camps for this? I've wondered what the FEMA camps were all about for years. Seems to me maybe that's part of the plan here. Are you familiar with FEMA camps?
Yeah, I don't know what their plan is. They just, the Attorney General's response is, hey, we're not locking people up yet. So, you don't even have a case because we're not locking people up. And I was like, well, you would be right if that was my argument, but that's not my argument. That's not the injury I'm claiming. That's not any of my causes of action. So actually, they just, I think, look, they've tried to stall this lawsuit since day one. When I filed in New York State Supreme Court, the first thing they did was remove it to federal court. So they removed my case to federal court, claiming this is a federal case with federal law and federal constitutional issues. And I was like, I'm sorry, are you reading the same papers that I am? I mean, there was nothing federal about my case, but they removed it to federal court and I had to fight to get back to state court. So I had to do motion practice, which means I had to make a motion to the federal judge and say, hey, this is why this case should be in New York State court. And then the Attorney General replies and says, well, this is why we think it shouldn't be. And then I had to reply again. And I had to actually pull in a colleague, Attorney Tom Marcel. He's in the Albany area, terrific guy. And I had to pull him in because I wasn't even admitted in the Western District of New York. In federal court, you have to be admitted to the court specifically. So I'm admitted in the Southern District of New York, but I wasn't admitted in the Western District, and it would have taken me probably weeks to get admitted into the Western District to even just start the motion practice. So thankfully, he was willing to help me and donate his time, and we were able to get the case. We had to do oral arguments in front of the federal judge, and we were able to get the case remanded back to state court. So then they fought me on the amicus brief, and it was just one thing after the next of trying to stall, waste time, waste, my resources. And, so they don't want to fight on the merits because, I personally believe they don't have a case on the merits. So
we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I want to get to some other questions here. Maureen, feel free.
Yeah, I just had a comment. If we're trying to increase public awareness and garner support, one of the things I think would help is an article that was simply explaining how egregious this is, and something that we could all distribute through our networks. We also, our movement, which I'm not connected to this particular publication, except for the fact it's called The Flame. It's our movement's newspaper. In addition to sending out to our networks, like in the Defender or in our individual newsletters, the beauty of this, we just published an article on the front page about why children should never receive the COVID vaccine, and all the links and all the references. But the beauty is you leave it in bars, you leave it in restaurants, you leave it in libraries, and people of the movable middle pick this up. And if an article is written that simply explains what you just explained to us, that I think, at least for me, I was aware of this to some degree, but I didn't have the depth of understanding that I do now. I mean, this is insanity on steroids, and we have to get this out to the masses and get the public really inflamed about this and protesting and resisting. So I'm suggesting that an article be written with a simple explanation and some action steps that we try to get it to. We have lots of connections with our alternative media, and this particular newspaper we have great connections with, and then people distribute them in places that, it's not just speaking to the choir or preaching to the choir, but we get beyond that.
Yeah, that's terrific. I actually, maybe Curtis could connect us afterwards. Sure. I just had an article published about this in American Thinker, which is an online publication. So I'm happy to talk to you afterwards and share that with you. And if, I could write another article or something, but yeah, any way that we can spread the word I'm very interested.
Fantastic. Maureen, I'll be sure to connect you and everyone else.
Great, thank
To
you.
reach her directly. And I just want to emphasize that I consider Bobbie a tremendous warrior, like I do everybody here, but especially the fact that she's doing this pro se. When I first heard she was doing this pro se, I'm like, oh my God. So I think whatever we could do to help her individually or help her organize whatever events to raise money, because it's not about just her, it's about us. I mean, this is a fight for us. So I'm going to make a donation. I'm not rich, but I can contribute something. And so whatever people feel they could do, whatever they can share with their networks about trying to support this, I think it'll be good for her law firm, for her, so she doesn't have to bear the full burden when she's, trying to represent New York State, that, we try to help carry some of that burden as well. So whatever we can do to put our minds together and come up with ideas, I think it would be helpful for all of us. There's someone here, all I see is iPhone. I don't know who that is. I know you got your hand up.
I don't, Curtis, can I say something quick?
Yeah,
John,
feel free.
I got two comments on law. One is that you've done a great job presenting the case. Curtis, thanks for bringing the case to us and telling us about it, because I wasn't aware of it. Bobbie, since you said you had a background in tax, my background goes back into the 80s for, so I'm an old guy, but tax work, federal tax work. So there's a plethora, there's a huge body of federal law, which I know you're in the state court right now, but you can use federal law in this action, but by analogy at least, or maybe directly, that the IRS is used to and has often made law out of regulation over the last 50 years. And so courts have pushed them back. Even friendly courts have been pushing them back for years on overstepping that. So there's a ton of case law on abuse of regulation without the basis of law. So without the basis of statutory law. So if you look at that, there's a ton of stuff there. The second thing I'll say is that you mentioned the when they flipped you to federal law. I happen to know this case because I worked on it in case father actually won the case in the Supreme Court, but the Howlett case stands in US Supreme Court history as that state courts can hear federal issues. So that's a waste of their time to even try to move you, because Howlett says you can hear any federal law case in a state court, and that's still the precedent of the Supreme Court of the United States. So you can argue federal issues in a state court and avoid sort of that back and forth or being pushed out of state courts, because that's proven law and that doesn't really work. And the third thing I'll do is politics. And I know you have a governor that is feeling strength, but I'm going to show you a picture of another governor that was feeling strength. And from a politics standpoint, I'll read you something from his Rolling Stones article. And this was when he was really feeling strong, May of 2020. And I'll say this is what he said. The Rolling Stone article asked him, what do you do when there's a tension between scaring the hell out of people and having them stay inside for the virus? What do you want to do without creating mass panic? Here's what he said. Well, look, there's no doubt government is only as effective as the people allow it to be, unless you criminalize the behavior. This is a democracy, and people have to have free will. And if they hear what government says and they agree, they'll follow it. If they don't agree, they don't follow it. What is the counterbalance? And he said criminalization could be the counterbalance.
Wow.
Yeah, so I want to just point out,
could be the counterbalance.
Yeah, I just want to point out.
How did that work? How did that work out for you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway, that's it for me.
The regulation also writes in that they can hold you criminally accountable if they want.
Well, he told the Rolling Stone that's the only way to do it.
Wow. Okay. I want to go into because there's several people with questions. I want to get to them quickly. Is that Lauren? Who's you don't have a name there, so it just says iPhone. Has your hand up? Is that Lauren? Okay, I don't know who you are, so I can't call you by name, and you're on mute. Okay, well, you can chime in later. Jennifer Lester, your hand is up.
Yes, I put something in the comments for everyone. That's model legislation that was proposed back in 2001 by Georgetown. Is it Georgetown Center? I'm sorry, by the CDC and Georgetown Law. And I found that legislation in doing research in Maryland's Emergency Management Act, which actually was changed back in 2002. And we had quarantine and isolation camps law passed in 2002, actually, as a part of emergency powers. The governor gives the power to the Secretary of Health to quarantine anyone or any groups of individuals without any probable cause or anything, just stick you in a quarantine camp, 30 days rolling. And they can actually come into your house and destroy all of your personal property while you're locked up in the quarantine camp. And that legislation that Maryland has was based on that model legislation I just sent to everybody. And in doing my research, I found that it was actually the goal of the CDC to try to get everyone, every state in the country to adopt this legislation. So I think New York's, I don't know if you've been able to find anything in New York's history of the legislation that you're challenging, but you might find that document if you start digging around. And certainly other people can look at it. I think that a lot of our states have adopted a lot of that legislation if you look into their emergency management laws.
Great, thank you. Ruth Ackerman?
Yeah, hi. So
Yeah.
in terms of getting the word out there, more people involved. Now, you understand that the case centers around about the separation of powers and we're about the legislatures. But I want to speak about, like you had said, that you can't get any Democrats on, and that's not surprising, any Democratic legislation. But there is a diverse group on the United New York State, and they're also plaintiffs, I understand. And what you're saying is that the damage for this citizens group is that their voice is being extinguished because they actually vote in the legislatures. I'm wondering if we could get more just citizens, regularly ordinary citizens involved in understanding this, in that there is another damage, even though the Attorney General says, well, we haven't locked anybody up yet. But what I'm seeing is that for all the talk about public health and safety, we all know that most of what's been going on for the last 2 years is not really geared towards public health and safety. And what's really going on is what I would call division. And we have, the right of association. And if people could be made to understand that even if they would not necessarily possibly get locked up, but it could be they're going to be separated from family members, from friends, from colleagues, from neighbors. And that's that is something that is a right of theirs that would also be extinguished. So as a group, in other words, the entire humanity is potentially a plaintiff in this kind of damage that's hanging over their heads, because even if they're not the ones who are directly damaged by possibly being quarantined, they're directly damaged by this force, I'm going to call it disunity, but a forced separation from other people, and they have a right of association.
Right. Yeah, Ruth, we have to we got to make the comments brief, but you have a great point to say nothing of, can imagine what living conditions might be inside these quarantine camps. Would they be required to be mandatory testing? Would they be required to take the vaccines? And God knows what kind of food they would have. We've heard a lot of horrifying stories from different countries. But thank you very much. I can't pronounce the name. Igalis. I'm sorry. The one with has the image of a book on the front. I can't pronounce your name. You have your hand up.
I think that's maybe Brucia.
Okay. Oh, Brucia. Okay, Brucia. Did you want to say something? Yes.
Hi. Sorry. Sorry. I was thinking that maybe Bobbie could give me some written material and I could write an article, because I have about maybe close to 550 subscribers on my Substack. So that could help to get the word out.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
I'll put you
I'm
all
happy
in
to connect with you
contact.
after.
Yeah, Brucia has a massive network across the country. She's been kind enough to have me on her show and others. And yeah, I think that would be a great opportunity. Thank you, Brucia. Rita.
Okay, I just have some questions about like the timeline. Say, Bobbie, you wake up tomorrow morning, you get the decision that you won. All right, then they appeal to the appellate court, and then it goes to the Court of Appeals. They'll keep appealing till it gets to the Court of Appeals, right, which is the highest court in New York State. Now, say you keep winning, and what happens? Like, and they'll appeal it. I guess presumably they'll, put in a request to the Supreme Court, right? They'll go past the Court of Appeals if they keep losing. Will you think that will happen?
I don't know if they would try and get certiorari with the United States Supreme Court or not, but
Okay.
I don't know that the Supreme Court would take this case. They've been very reluctant to get involved with states.
Right. So say if you keep winning and you just keep winning, right? And you get to the Court of Appeals and you win. What happens if we wake up tomorrow and you got a good decision from the court that you originally filed in? Does the regulation get struck down immediately and then they have to appeal to bring it back? How does that work?
It depends what the judge rules. So what our pleading asks for is that the judge we ask for declaratory judgment, which means we want the judge to say something. We want him to say that this is an illegal regulation. It was promulgated improperly through the Department of Health. It didn't have, they didn't have the authority to do it. And we want him to say it's null, it's void. You can't keep promulgating this and you can't enforce it. So we want him to do that. That's one thing we're asking for, is for him to declare it's unconstitutional, null and void. But then we also asked for an injunction, like preliminary and permanent. So we want the judge to say, you can't, to the Department of Health and the executive branch, you can't enforce this. So like, we know they're going to appeal, right? I mean, I would be shocked if they didn't appeal if I win at this level. So, I think that if the judge can put the injunction in place and say, you can't enforce this, I think what they're going to do is they're probably going to appeal at least right away that part of the decision, which is what they did in the mask case. When there was a mask case back in January out in Nassau County, where the judge ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and said that the mask mandate was unconstitutional. But then the AG immediately appealed it to the appellate division and said, no, we need to stay. We need to stay. You can't have an injunction on this. And they won. And so that's why, even though that decision came down in January, that's why Hochul was allowed to keep going with her mask mandate until March, when she voluntarily, supposedly, lifted it. So because that appellate division court said, oh yeah, no, you can't have an injunction on this. So my guess is that if we get a similar ruling, they're probably going to try the same thing that they tried with that case. And just to go back to the federal case for a second, somebody earlier said, I think it was John said, a state court judge can hear federal issues in combination with state issues. That's correct. However, they want it in federal court, and I think they wanted it there, one, to slow me down, but two, because then they could if it stayed there, they could make a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction, because it was all state claims. So I think it was just a game that they were playing. But yeah, I fully expect them to appeal, and we have to see exactly what the judge grants us to see what exactly they're going to appeal for or about.
And one quick point, Cattaraugus County is strongly Republican, right? Obviously, it's very conservative county. That's why Barclay and Goodell are kind of stepping forward, because they're safely, is that a conservative county? Do you know that for sure?
Yeah, so Cattaraugus County is, that's Senator George Borrello. That's one of the counties that he represents. And then Assemblyman Joe Giglio is the assemblyman for Cattaraugus County, and Assemblyman Joe Giglio is actually one of the assemblymen on the amicus brief.
Okay. So
we have both the senator, and Cattaraugus County has declared itself a constitutional county.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I see one last hand up. It's Jennifer Schaefer. You're on mute. You got to unmute yourself. Jennifer, yeah.
Right,
Okay.
I got a lot of kids and dogs and everything, so I didn't want to disturb the conversation. Thank you so much, Bobbie, for your work. I did write an article on my blog, gcherrypresents.com, and I tied in the connection between Shanghai and what's going on now. And the title of the article is Could New York become the next Shanghai? And tying in all of the connections between what we're seeing overseas and how the Chinese have taken total control of their people. And what I want to ask, or the comment I want to make, is how close is New York to looking like that? I mean, do they have, I've heard they have had facilities, but I'm unable to verify that, where they have, because I did read that they could use hotels or buildings from, you know, whoever wants to donate their property for this. Is there a facility now? Is there one in the making? Could somebody technically now be taken away against their will? And how much time frame will we have before we look like Shanghai or Beijing?
We're there.
Wow.
We're there.
Wow.
The regulation is in place. They can knock on my door tonight. It's in place. And the AG's argument that, oh, well, we're not using this, you know, in their papers, they were arguing, oh, well, you have no standing, there's no injury, right? Oh, he actually tried to say that in oral arguments too. And I said, well, wait a second. I'm not arguing that the state doesn't have the power to construct camps. That's not my argument. My argument is you don't have the power to issue the orders to lock people up. They have plenty of places that they can use, because the regulation doesn't just say a specific facility. The regulation actually says they can use hotels, they can use medical facilities, they can use whatever they want. They could use apartment buildings, or they could use empty jails. We have a lot of empty jails in New York because they let a lot of people out and shut down the jails because of, you know, in the name of COVID, whatever. So, you know, I want to point out something that the amicus brief brings to light, that underneath this regulation, so if you violate a provision of the public health law, like the law, not this regulation, if you violate an actual law, right, it's a crime, right? So you get punished. But under the new bail reform laws in New York, and bail reform I use very loosely, under the new bail reform laws in New York, you can commit a crime and you can get arrested and you can get, you know, brought in and they book you, and then you're released, right? There, depending on the crime, you know, there's no bail, right? They don't hold you. You're released. Under this regulation, a law-abiding New Yorker can be arrested, basically, for maybe having a communicable disease.
Wow.
So that's pointed out in the amicus brief by Assemblyman Andy Goodell, who authored it. And it's a brilliant point. It's a brilliant point. And I brought it up in my oral arguments. It's like, yeah, absolutely. This regulation is the antithesis of due process. That means you can treat a criminal way better than you can treat a law-abiding New Yorker, just because, well, I don't know, maybe you annoyed the department, maybe the commissioner of health is annoyed because you went to a certain type of function, a political function, a fundraiser, an event that, you know, the state doesn't approve of or something. You know, I mean, it's the power they give themselves in this regulation is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. I mean, I read the regulation for the first time. I was like, are these people kidding me? You know, you don't have to be a lawyer for bells to go off in your brain and say, what are they doing? But anyway, Jennifer, I think I would love to read your article, or if you want to do an interview and then write a new article. Yeah,
I would. I did post the article in the chat. My website was down for a couple of days, a technical glitch, not censorship, even though my website's on GoDaddy, but it was a technical glitch. So it is up and working right now. I just posted it in the chat. It's lengthy. I tend to be lengthy. My mom turned me on to what was going on with you because she's very active in a group in New York. And she was telling me about a publication they were putting together. She's like, and I was like, I've been reading about that and I want to write about this. So she kind of inspired me to dig into that. I'm in New York and in Connecticut. And just to say that in Connecticut, we do have a weird quarantine law on our books that recently was fought in court. And they favored inside of our previous Governor Malloy that they could get certain people on suspicion of being sick. So this stuff is extremely terrifying. I don't cover that at all in the article. I just strictly stick with New York State and Shanghai and Beijing and tapping into the shielding approach by the CDC, who claims that the shielding approach is only for camp-like settings. But when you read the documentation that goes to back up the shielding approach, it is talking about community settings and all this other stuff, and is identical to Shanghai and what New York is proposing. It's insane.
Jennifer, I don't think I have your email address. or phone number, but I just know I put my email address in there. If you contact me, I will give you Bobbie's phone number and email, but only do that with the people who are on this call.
I'm on we're connected because I go by J Cherry typically. So we're connected because I've got your personal contact. I know I've done a lot of stuff with Brian Festo, with Connecticut Freedom Alliance. And all
Okay,
that
but still just email it to me. Okay, you got my
I
email
totally will,
Just
because I
contact
would love
me.
to interview you, Bobbie. Thank you so much for what you're doing, for doing this for pro bono, because you have a tremendous amount of work on your plate. God bless you for what you're doing, because this is so important. Thank you.
Yep.
Curtis?
Yes, Stephanie, go ahead.
I have one question. So Bobbie Ann's information needs to go on all of our platforms basically immediately about the pro bono work. When we shared the Mike Yoder stuff, I think he was able to raise like $96,000 in 2 days, if I remember the number, for his briefs with the military stuff that he was working on. The other big red flag that I see is that, like, Mary was just telling Bobbie critical information about the measles case that can really help Bobbie. But what I was talking about 2 years ago, and I know everyone is swamped, everyone that's basically in our groups is doing like so many things. But with the legal, there needs to be a master database where all of the like-minded attorneys can basically post what they're working on and what has passed and what can be used. Like because all the attorneys are kind of piecemealing, like Jim's working on one thing, Mary's working on another, CHD has theirs listed, ICANN is doing so. Like, there needs to be one site that basically we bring all the legal stuff in, at least from the Northeast or the big Democratic states, whatever, that are under massive issues, where attorneys can go in there and say, oh, hey, this person filed this. And, it's not Westlaw and not the other thing, just something that's within our own groups that we really know what's going on.
Yeah, Stephanie, I think that's an absolutely great idea. We've talked about in some of the other groups like MAM and others about the need to do exactly that. But yeah, I guess the time has come. It really does need people. Everybody should know. Everybody should be able to go to one website and just know about Bobbie's case and all the others.
Right. We need something legal kind of where I don't know if CHD is the platform. I can talk to some of the CHD, but where there's just legal around the country. This is what's going on in California, not CHD. These are other attorneys working on things. Sujata's mask case that she originally did.
Okay, I think it's a great idea. Rita, did you raise your hand again or not?
No,
okay.
No.
Well, I think I've covered everybody so far. So Bobbie, if you have any last concluding comments, and then I guess we'll wrap up. I want to let things run too late. So, and I'll say again, if you're not sure if I have your information, I've already put my email address, curtiscost @gmail.com. That's my email. So in case I may have missed you, because I'm missing everybody on the call, Bobbie's contact information. But you have my email just in case I might miss you, man, if I may not. So Bobbie, would you like to have the final words?
Yeah, that's great. I want to thank you again, Curtis, for putting this together. This was really awesome. And I want to thank everybody for taking the time. I know everybody's super busy, but I am happy to do any sort of follow-up interview. If somebody wants to write an article or post a blog, or somebody wants to, go on a radio show and talk about this, like, I'm happy to either give interviews, do interviews, give you information, you do the interviews, whatever it takes to get the word out about this. I know everybody here has some sort of a platform or following. I would love to. I know, Michael Caine had me on for Children's Health Defense, AM, which was awesome. And like things like that, I am happy to continue to do that and help people understand, because I think there's a lot of confusion about it too. When A416, that proposed bill by Nick Perry, was pulled in December of 2021, people were like, oh, this is great, we won, A4, even I was like, A416, this is great, and then I was like, wait a minute, the regulation's still there, so people think it went away and they don't realize the regulation is still there and it says basically the same thing. So, we just need to raise this awareness. So I'm happy to do any sort of follow-up interview or podcast or just talk on the phone, like whatever anybody wants to do to help get the word out. I'm happy to help. So when Curtis stops the recording, then I'll give you, my contact phone number and email and such.
Okay, I can make an attempt. I hope I don't have a problem technically. Lorraine, did you want to say something else? I see your hand up, or you already commented.
Yeah, I had mentioned it in the chat, but just in case, I just wanted, Bobbie, I wanted you to be prepared that the argument about existing law, they're going to counter that by saying it takes too long, it's too cumbersome, and in an emergency, the disease will spread and the deaths will occur. So you have to be ready to answer that, not just say that there's existing law. And I also would just comment that this whole thing doesn't even, in my opinion, doesn't even qualify as a pandemic. You might want to be sure to bring in the fact that the deaths in the United States are roughly 1,010,500 attributed to COVID. We all know that's inflated. When you divide that by the number of citizens, which is roughly 330 million, you get 0.31% of the population have died. I mean, any deaths are horrible, but 0.31% of a population is not, the Spanish flu or the Black Plague or any of this. And I think it's helpful to have those numbers also to kind of make the point that all this hysteria is a bit overblown.
Right.
Yeah, that is, that's a great point, Lorraine, because I do point that out in it's part of my lawsuit. My petition, my lawsuit is 61 pages long. And that doesn't count the memorandum of law in support or my affirmation in support. We've filed over 100 documents in this lawsuit so far. And we've only been at it for two and a half months. So yeah, that is part of the argument I make is you guys can't even justify an emergency. And also you have to really, another section of the argument is the State Administrative Procedures Act is being violated by the defendants, by the governor and the Department of Health. They're not following the rules. When you issue an emergency regulation, there has to actually be an emergency, which I argue there isn't an emergency in this case. And I don't even have to get into the science because you guys aren't me arguing to the Attorney General. You guys aren't following the State Administrative Procedure Act because that requires that you actually show what you're relying on to prove that there's an emergency. And in this case, all they rely on is propaganda. It's statistics from the World Health Organization declared a world emergency in January 2020. There's nothing there of substance. They don't rely on they don't have one study. They don't have one study that they cite that says that forcibly locking down people who may or may not have a communicable disease is an effective way to stop the spread. They don't have one study that they rely on.
Well, I'm sure
anything like that.
I'm sure you have all the research on the fact that the lockdowns have been totally discredited and disproven to do anything. So if you don't have that, you need to get that. And plenty of physicians have that data.
Yeah, we do reference that there are over 400 studies that show that the forced lockdowns didn't work, but we just reference that because again, my lawsuit's not about the science, right? I'm not trying to argue them on the science because a judge is not going to rule on science. We've seen that time and again in the past 2 years. The courts do not want to touch the science. I'm not arguing science. I'm arguing the law. The law says you're supposed to prove your emergency if you're going to call it an emergency and start issuing emergency regulations, but you can't prove the emergency. Where's your proof? I don't see any of it, right? So I'm sticking with the law because that's how we're going to win. This is a legal argument. You're breaking the law on multiple levels. You're busting through the Constitution, which you're not allowed to do. So it's sheer legal argument. But yeah, no, it's a great point, Lorraine.
I'm going to hit record in a few seconds. Hopefully everybody can stay on and then we'll still be coherent. So I hope so. So I'm about to hit record and things disappear. Well, I'll just connect everybody later, but Bobbie's going to give out her phone number, other information, but just to people here. So I'm hitting the record And 3, 2, 1.
Okay, everybody, the video is finished. And I will leave you again with this interesting fact. For those who come later, can you see this? How this, which one? This thing glows. As soon as I get the new batch, I'm going to get 8 of these test kits, and we are going to test together all of them. Look at the glowing. Huh? This is freaking serious. As soon as I have any other good news, I'll be back. God bless us all. And there is an idea that I had for a long time. We need to do groups, support groups, to have fun, to share information, but most of all, to get back to life with happiness, with love, and keep doing the things that they don't want us to do. That's what they were doing, is still in fear. Of course, people who are sleepy, they will be still in fear. Today I had a new client, and she came with a muzzle, and I told her, you know, I don't use it. It's up to you if you want to use it. And and then she said, do you want me to take it out? Of course, I said. It's awful to have a person in front of you, you cannot see the face. Of course, I found out later, I have ways to find out if the people got the thingy or not. I have 2 ways, and one is in my phone. I think I showed you some videos before. So my point is, people who got the thingy, they are still afraid. So we need to get together in houses, in parks, and keep doing and get together with like-minded people. God bless us all, and we have to keep the fight. One of the there is a meme over there that says something like, if you are doing nothing, let me see. If you choose to do nothing, you become part of the problem. And doing something is not that difficult. I go to every single rally around my town. The ones who were before in that box, I have 2 drones, little drones. A little bit to play with my son, but the other is when I go to the rallies, I'm going to do videos with the drone. I have fun, but I do my part. I see you soon. Whenever I have some other news. Thank you so much for participating. And the last suggestion is to sign up. I put the link to our email list, because there is tons of information that we cannot share, we cannot show here. So I receive every day a lot of emails thanking for the information that I share. God bless us all.